Hello, folks. Welcome back to English 414 Methods of Research. I'm going to create a little video lecture here for you for the next assignment, which is the Annotated Bibliography in Module 4, due a week from today, November 1st. I'll just briefly explain the assignment and then go through an actual sample annotated bibliography for you. So you've already produced, or should have, a review of an electronic scholarly resource in Module 1. And as I mentioned in the video lecture for that, you're supposed to be using search terms to find sources for your eventual research paper. And your research paper is in Module 6 here. So as I mentioned previously, the scholarly resource review, electronic scholarly resource review, the research paper proposal that was turned in last week, the annotated bibliography, and the research paper itself all are for this research paper. So the electronic resource review was to find some sources using an electronic database or other electronic resource to find sources for your research paper. The research paper proposal itself, of course, is what you intend to write your research paper about. The annotated bibliography, which I'm going to explain in this video, is a list, like in a works cited form, of sources that you plan to use in your research paper with a brief little paragraph or summary about each one. And then, of course, the research paper itself. I should point out here as an aside that if you have not already scheduled an interview with a scholar for Module 5 of Interview with a Scholar that's due, in about 3 weeks, I strongly encourage you now on October 25th to go ahead and schedule a 10 to 15 minute interview with a current or former professor, either in history, English, so on. And that's all explained in Module 5. All right, so I'm going to use the document that is now available in Module 4 here for the annotated bibliography to walk you through this assignment. But I'm first going to kind of go over this, the instructions here for you. So it says, before this, submitting your research paper, you will submit an annotated bibliography of the sources you will use in that research paper, right? Just what I just explained. And for this assignment, there should be a minimum of 6 and a maximum of 20 entries for this annotated bibliography. So I say, 6 to 20 because everyone's topics and papers will vary. You're welcome to include as many as you want, up to 20. I doubt most of you will have 20 entries, but you need at least a minimum of 6. And I go on to say that your sources in this assignment, the annotated bibliography, should include both primary and secondary sources, which I will clarify in a moment, and include a mixture of both print and electronic material, like a book and a web resource, electronic resource, not to be confused with a PDF file in a database of a scholarly article. If you find a PDF file in a scholarly article, say in JSTOR or Project Muse, that is in effect a print source because those are simply print pages that are then scanned in PDF form and have actual page numbers. So don't confuse electronic material with one of those. And then after each MLA cited entry, you know, this is an English course, so MLA instead of APA form. Then your annotation, which is a brief summary, should include a small paragraph of 2 to 3 sentences summarizing in your own words the nature of the source, you know, like what is it, what is it about, and how or why it fits into your research paper. So you're doing 2 things in this little paragraph, right? What is the nature of the source, and how or why does it fit into your research paper? And so I will walk you through this assignment here. This document here, which is using my sources, if you simply in this module 4, if I actually just go to the module itself to show you, if you go to the module, it's the same set of instructions, and you click this link here that says sample annotated bibliography of mine I created for you to follow. Download this document as a template. If you click on this, what you will get is this document, but it's because in our Google Drive, it appears, as you can see, in Google Docs. Do not, I cannot stress this enough if you want to do well in this assignment, do not edit this document in Google Docs. Instead, once you have this page open, go over to File, Download Microsoft Word.docx file, and download that to your desktop, your folder, wherever you store your documents. Once you have it on your computer, then you can open it up in Microsoft Word and edit it with your own entries and annotations. The reason I say do not do it in Google Docs is Google Docs does not play well, so to speak, with Microsoft Word. Let me just give you an example. In this document, if I scroll down, you'll see there's this big white space down here. And that is because the formatting of margins and background, if you will, of general document formatting in Google Docs is not the same as, Microsoft Word. Everyone has access to Microsoft Word in the Office 365 if you just log in with your Grambling student email, which I explain in the syllabus. So again, once you have this page open, then go to File, Download Microsoft Word doc, and then you can edit this template because it's really a template for you to use, and then upload it to Module 4. All right, so here's the assignment in Microsoft Word form. And you will keep the heading the same because everyone's doing the same assignment, but different sources. What you will need to change, of course, is your surname and the page numbers. So you can see here, you know, I've included mine because these are in fact my sources. And then, you know, on page 2, right? And by the way, here is the same document in Microsoft Word. You can see that there's not that big white spacing at the bottom of page 1 that there is in the Google Doc form. So I think many of you know this, but to change or edit the page number with your own surname, you simply double click anywhere on the name or the page number, and it will reveal the header, right? So you can see the header here now demarcated with this blue line. And all you do is you simply type in your name. So whether it's Smith or Doe or, you know, Green or whatever, once you have your name typed in, you just click anywhere on the regular page itself, right? And then it stays there with your edited name. And then notice it automatically changes it to the sequential paging. So again, that's pretty simple to do. Just double click on the name, insert your name. Oops, sorry. Insert your name. Remember to keep a space between your surname and the page number, as MLA style does. Okay, so I've created this template for you, but also as a model to show you. So your surname will change, your label, annotated bibliography will remain the same. And then what you will do is first create a list in alphabetical order, of course, because this is MLA style. You can see that B, Bain, comes before H, Hogg, okay? Is to create these entries correctly in MLA format, thus the MLA works cited exercise that we did in Module 2. And if you don't remember how to do all of these specific formats for a book or an electronic resource or a scholarly article, go to the homepage or the syllabus, and we have a master link, right, to our Google Drive. You click on that Google Drive and it'll take you to all of the files in our folder, our methods of research folder. Right now I have it on what's called the list view, like an alphabetical list. You can change it, toggle up here in the upper right hand corner to what's called a grid view. There's the actual document itself that I just showed you. But in this folder, our class folder, there is a document I already showed you with the MLA works cited exercise called the MLA Handbook 8E, meaning 8th edition. If you just click on this, this is a very detailed listing of how to format sources according to works cited. So let me just scroll down a bit to some, right? So let's say you have an author with a pseudonym, which sometimes happen, like Mark Twain is not his real name, and Samuel Clemens. You would need to know how to do that. Or when you have a work without an author's name, which often happens, as it says here, you do not list the author as anonymous. I have an example of this in the sample annotated bibliography I'll show you, but here's how you do that. It's very detailed. You could, if you need to use a source as an episode of a television series, you could, and this is how you do it. There's the title of the episode, the series itself is italicized, Vampire Slayer, and so on. Okay. All right, so again, that's the MLA Handbook 8E or 8th edition inside of our Methods of Research folder. So going back to the assignment, once you have these entries in proper MLA style format, then you can add what is needed in terms of an annotation. Okay. I'd say 2 to 3 sentences for each one. This happens to be 4, but I could have just added a coordinating conjunction and here and made it 3 sentences. So this annotation does 2 things. It explains the nature of the source, and then it also explains how I intend to use it in my paper. Okay. So it says this encyclopedia entry on the peculiar little fairy known as a brownie or brownie provides evidence that Hogg's own description in the novel corresponds to the Scottish brownie, which is, quote, short of stature, only standing about 3 feet tall. If clothed at all, these brown-faced and shaggy-headed fairies wears ragged brown clothing, unquote, and performs domestic and farm chores. However, if you criticize their works, brownies, quote, may become offended and, quote, turn into an injurious Bogart that hates cats, cheats or cheaters, misers, ministers, and teetotalers. That is people who do not drink. And that's on page 67. That is, these quotations come from page 67 of this source. And then I go on to say, I will demonstrate how the brownie in Hogg's novel behaves in a similar mercurial manner. Mercurial means unpredictable, flighty, fickle, you might say. So one thing about this quotation, and I've not mentioned this before, but I think many of you know, or you should know, notice that there is a grammatical error right here. Fairies is plural and wears is the singular verb form, but that is not my error. That was in the original. So right after the grammatical error, I include in brackets the SIC or sick designation to tell the reader that, no, this is not my error. I realize it's an error, but it's in the original. And this is something that if you have not learned, you need to, it is a standard academic practice where, as you can see right here, let me just use the Merriam-Webster. I think there's a example of that right here. So it means intentionally so written. It's used after a printed word or passage to indicate that it is intended exactly as printed, or to indicate that it exactly reproduces an original, right? So that's what I'm doing in the SIC, is I'm reproducing the original error in brackets there. You can see here how it's done. So that will sometimes happen, believe it or not, things that are printed, and you can see here, this is an actual book, Encyclopedia of Fairies and Oral Folklore and Mythology, printed in London by Macfarlane and Company, and therefore not meticulously edited because there's a grammatical error. Okay. So this is a print source, right? Remember, it needs to be a mixture of print and electronic. Then the next source listed alphabetically by the Scottish novelist James Hogg. He has a novel called The Brownie, or Bruni, as I would say in Scots, The Bruni of Bodsbeck. This material here in brackets does not mean an error like the SIC above, but it means, as Mla Handbook shows, that you can include optional information to clarify for your reader. So this novel was published in 1818 in 2 volumes, 2 separate volumes. But the edition that I am using is edited by Douglas Mack, published in Edinburgh by the Scottish Academic Press in 1976. If I had just put 1976, readers may think that the novel itself was published in 1976, but in fact, it was published long before then. And so again, I give a short little summary here of the work and how I intend to use it. This 2-volume novel is the primary text under examination throughout my paper. So pretty much all of you folks, well, let me just say all of you, need to have a statement like this in your annotated bibliography. That is to say, you need to identify at least 1, maybe 2, sources that is your primary text under examination or analysis. So if you're writing a research paper in Dr. Wilson's Shakespeare course on the Taming of the Shrew, and that is your primary text, then you will say, this play is my primary text that I'm examining in my paper, right? Just a very clear statement of that. And then I go on to say, although the novel was published in 1818, I rely upon this skillfully edited edition by the late and renowned Hogg scholar Douglas Mack. That's important because of the argument I'm trying to make in the paper about the way in which it was written and published in terms of its editing and censoring, really. So I then continue to say the curious dual nature of this novel's narrative with its intensely religious characters and context can be seen as a precursor to Hogg's more widely read novel in 1824, The Private Memoirs and Confessions of a Justified Sinner, so that this novel is in effect a kind of narrative experiment by the author Hogg that will later appear in a much more skillful form in his 1824 work. So, this is how I intend to use it in my paper as the primary text, and here's why it's important, or the nature of the text. I then move on to another primary text, another print source, and this is an actual work written by King James, the one when you hear the King James version of the Bible, but please do not mistake that he wrote that Bible. He commissioned a group of biblical scholars at the time to produce a translation of the Bible, and it was during his reign early on, as his full title is King James the Sixth of Scotland and First of England, because after Elizabeth dies here in 1603, as a Scottish king, he unifies the crown, as it were. Anyhow, he was really interested in witchcraft and demonology, and he writes this text in 1597 while he's still king of of Scotland, technically. And it says demonology, and this is the old archaic spelling, so you have to retain the original spelling. Demonology in form of a dialogue divided into 3 books, and you can see it's 3 volumes, published in Edinburgh by Robert Waldegrave. Although this particular examination of witchcraft and demonology was written before James became king after Elizabeth I's death in 1603, this work helps me to reinforce the, quote, father figure argument in my paper, because as a titular father of Scotland at the time of this publication, that is, he was, the king of Scotland when he published this, and therefore like the father of the nation, King James I gave his imprimatur, or his seal of approval, stamp of approval, if you will, to disavowing fairy belief. According to King James in the 3rd volume, Gentiles, that is those who are not Jews, Gentiles concocted the notion that upon every person is bestowed a good sprite or spirit, called a genus bonus, and an evil sprite or spirit called a genus malus, and that Christians should not only recognize this as a sham, but also reject the genus malus while privileging the genus bonus. So I weave this argument, if you will, by King James into my paper. So I move from print sources to an electronic source. You can see here this web address or website is the library at the University of Edinburgh, where my colleague James Clausen got his degree, the Edinburgh University Library. But it's an online source, right, from the Walter Scott Digital Library through the library's website. And the title of the entry is called James Hogg and Sir Walter Scott. It was published in October 24, 2003. There's the truncated, shortened website. That's all you need. You don't need the full entire URL. The website itself is fine. By the way, just to break that down for you, that's Walter Scott, meaning the Walter Scott Digital Library. LIB stands for library itself. ED is Edinburgh. AC is academic institution or entity. And UK, of course, is United Kingdom. In the United States, we just have like gram.edu, where edu means higher ed institution. And then, of course, I accessed it on 9 December 2015. You need that. You need both the publication date and the access date for web sources. Then there's a brief entry about what this source is and how I intend to use it. This brief online biographical entry helps to not only establish important friendship and literary relationship between Hogg and Scotland's most popular author at the time, that is Sir Walter Scott, but this entry also contains an image of the title page of Hogg's 1818, The Brownie of Bodsbeck. That is the novel, that is my primary text. I intend to use this title page image to underscore both Hogg's and Scott's important connection to the prominent publisher William Blackwood in Edinburgh. Notice here, this is a grammatical reference, that I have both of these possessive apostrophe because they had an important connection, relationship to the publisher, but they had it on their own terms separately, right? As you know, one does with another person. So if I had written it like this, if I had said Hogg and Scott's connection, that would imply to the reader that they were working as a team, when in fact they were not. Okay, then I move on from an electronic source to another print source. And this is an Oxford University Press book. Remember, we're using MLA style, so MLA for University Press abbreviates that phrase and just simply puts UP to streamline. And this entry here says, this encyclopedia helps me to establish the deeply rooted Celtic tradition of Samhain. I know it looks like Samhain, but it's a Celtic word and you pronounce it Samhain. That later evolved into, surprise, surprise, Halloween. So Samhain, Halloween. Rogers observes that what, quote, was especially noteworthy about Samhain was its status as a borderline festival. It took place between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice, which is about right now, actually. And, you know, we have Halloween coming up this weekend. In Celtic lore, Samhain, it marked the boundary between summer and winter, light and darkness. In this respect, Samhain can be seen as a threshold, or what anthropologists call a liminal festival. Liminal is a fancy academic word for on the periphery or on the edges, as opposed to at the center of something. So I intend to use this quotation in the paper, and this, you know, have the page where that comes from in this book. Okay, so move from a print source to another electronic source. As you can see here, it comes from a website called Romantic Circles, which is an academic literary site. And this is what I was referring to earlier about the anonymous author. So normally, if you don't know who the author is, you begin with, in this case, you know, the title. And in this case, it's a review of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. But after scholarship on this review, we come to find out that in fact we know who the author is, even though it was published anonymously, or what we call an unsigned book review. Sometimes book reviews are signed by the reviewer and sometimes they're not. But we later discover through his letters and diary that in fact he wrote this review. So Mary Shelley publishes her famous novel, Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus, as the subtitle is known, in 1818. Again, this is extra optional information. But it's important to know because, as I say down here, both Shelley's Frankenstein and Hogg's Brownie novel were published in 1818. That is, I'm establishing what we call contemporaneity, that is, works that are in the readership, in the public domain, if you will, at the same time. So I say, this anonymous and unsigned book review of Mary Shelley's touchstone novel by Sir Walter Scott helps to reinforce the ubiquity or prevalence of the Scottish Bruni when Scott observes of the family near where the creature is lurking that, quote, this is from the review, the good people think themselves the favorite of some kind of spirit or Bruni. So I'm not sure if you read this novel, Frankenstein, but the creature or monster, as he's sometimes called, not to be confused with Frankenstein. Victor Frankenstein, is the one who creates the creature or the monster. At one point in the novel, the creature takes up shelter in a little hovel next to this family, the De Lacy family, and he observes them and learns from them, actually. But he also does good things for them, like, fetches their firewood, and they don't know where it's coming from. So, he's a kind spirit or Bruni. And notice in brackets here, I say emphasis in the original. And it's not part of the quotation. The quotation mark ends here. And what I'm pointing out is that in the original review, which you can go find on this website, Romantic Circles, you will see that this word is in fact italicized by Scott. So again, not changing the original quotation, I note to the reader that that italicization occurs in the original. Then I say how I'm going to use this. Since both Shelley's Frankenstein and Hogg's Brownie were published in 1818, this reception, meaning how a work is received, critical reception, underscores British readership's awareness, especially throughout Scotland, of the Bruni as a common allusion to someone or something as a fickle spirit. Again, fickle means, changeable and unpredictable. Shakespeare has this kind of damning phrase that, woman, fickle is thy name, unfortunately. I intend to show that this term, the Brownie or Bruni, as the Scots would say it, was sort of in the air, and they would know what it was or know about it. And so that's it. There are 6 entries in this sample annotated bibliography, a couple of which are electronic sources, the others are print sources. So again, a mixture of print and electronic. There's primary and secondary. This is my primary text, the novel itself. This work by King James could also be said as a primary text because it's, the age of it. A secondary source is something that is written about a work. So we could say that, in fact, if you're writing about Frankenstein, where is it? Right here, Sir Walter Scott's review of the novel is not the novel itself, right? But it's about Frankenstein, so it's a secondary source. And I'm using it that way as well. And this encyclopedia entry about Hogg and Scott is a secondary source because it's an online biographical entry about the authors. Excuse me. So there you have it. Not meant to be, entirely difficult assignment. You should be well on your way to already collecting sources for your research paper. And of course, the point of this is to, prevent you guys from procrastinating on your research paper, but also so that you can start developing very easy kind of summaries of your sources and where and how you intend to use them. So like whenever there's, in this case, like quotations, I'll just simply take that and copy and paste it in my paper rather than having to go back to the actual PDF file or document itself. All right, so it's pretty simple, I think. So that's it, folks. That is due again on a week from today, on November 1st in Module 4. Okay, that's it. Take care.